Billionaires want us to know it's never been a better time to get rich.
From everything that we see, the economy is still extremely strong.
More than strong. AI has driven the stock market to record highs, while the S&P has grown by double digits in the last 3 years, and investors are seeing years worth of returns in just 6 months.
I'd say the economy is 10 times its current size in 10 years.
So much so, thanks to the elites, that humanity is finally on the verge of saying goodbye to poverty.
AI and humanoid robots will actually eliminate poverty.
And if you're worried they'll eliminate your job, well, you're not wrong.
I think there's so many people who are afraid that AI is going to take their job. I think that there's going to be a labor shortage as a result.
That's if you even want to work.
My prediction is that work will be optional. Optional.
So stop worrying about inflation making your cash worthless or pricing you out of the supermarket, because it's deflation that's headed our way.
We're basically just issuing money to people because the output of goods and services will so far exceed the money supply that effectively you have deflation.
And every single one of us is seeing our lives improve.
That is the beautiful story of us all contributing to human progress and everybody's lives getting better and better.
It sounds amazing, doesn't it? A post-capitalist world. Robots will do our work while we're paid to live. The problems of the world, like poverty and hunger, are just distant memories from the Dark Ages. And it's the tech elites that will lead us to our utopia. The problem? Today's amazing economy, out of control wealth, and abundance of work that they keep talking about isn't really shared by anyone else, as most nations today are drowning simply trying to pay on the interest on debt every year. And if you ask anyone on the street today, they'll tell you they definitely feel worse off than they did 10 years ago. The economy for most people is seemingly worse than ever. Nobody can afford anything anymore. Ownership now is just a fantasy for anything. And this whole utopia where AI solves the problems, robots do the work, and humanity simply thrives without doing anything is more dystopian when you realize how close we are to their vision. A vision where the economy is great for a tiny few and the rest of us become part of the servant class. So then why, if the economy is booming, does it feel like we're in a depression? You've probably noticed that there are 2 versions of the modern economy that have moved further and further apart. The first version comes from those who lead the institutions around us. It's the version of events staged for the population. A politician steps up to a podium, or campaigns on a policy, or a CEO starts talking about their revenues and how they're offering more productivity, more work for a healthy society and a healthy workforce. They use the same handful of buzzwords: resilient, robust, revenues are climbing, everything is looking up and getting better. You have us to thank for it, so keep working hard and keep voting. The second version is the rent that keeps climbing, the wages that remain the same or drop despite inflation hitting record highs. Then there's the cost of food and the fuel you put in your car, and the decaying prospect of home ownership or raising a family. The stress, the anxiety, the question of how you can fulfill the one life you have. Economists could see this void between economic measurements and reality forming a long way off. Charles Goodhart coined Goodhart's Law in 1975, which says that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. It describes how people game the system. Everyone optimizes for the metric being tracked, even when doing so wrecks the thing the metric was meant to protect. The Soviets showed how and why this happens. Moscow set factory quotas in physical units, so they judge a nail factory on the number of nails they produce, and suddenly they get millions of tiny useless ones. The planners then switched the target to weight, and the factories started producing nails too heavy to hammer into anything. In 1960, the satirical magazine Crocodile made a cartoon of a manager collecting his medal in front of his triumph, a single massive nail hanging from 2 cranes. Through the 1960s, the USSR reported growth roughly double America's, and became the first industrial nation in history to watch life expectancy fall in peacetime. Every target was met, while everybody was dying younger. And this gives us a very important clue of what happens when Goodhart is right. Before we get into the true numbers of how bad the economy really is, I just need a few seconds of your time. When I went through the channel's data, I always find that a huge number of you who watch these videos aren't subscribed. Oftentimes, you have actually subscribed and then YouTube just unsubscribes you. We have literally hundreds of comments of people telling us they were subscribed and then one day you just weren't. It happens really quietly and you'd never even notice. So please, if you enjoy these videos, just check the button now and ensure you've hit subscribe. As right now we're really closing in on an important milestone for this channel. And so if you want to support the channel, this is the one thing you can do super quickly and for free while making a big impact for us. And if you do that for me, we're gonna keep going after everything they want to keep buried. The themes and parts of the world that they would much rather stay in the dark. That's the deal, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Now let's get back to the video. You see, it's often memed that Mississippi has a higher GDP per capita than most developed European nations, and it does. The poorest state in America outproduces Spain, Italy, and even rivals the UK. And so immediately it looks like there's something deeply wrong. And there is, because there are some metrics you just cannot fake. A baby born in Mississippi dies before its first birthday at nearly 4 times the rate of a baby born in Italy. Mississippi has the lowest life expectancy of any state in America of around 72, lower than any European country. Italy is 84 and has terrible unemployment and poverty too, but the country doesn't kill people earlier. Now see what happens when you head to inland Sardinia, one of 5 blue zones on Earth where people live exceptionally long and healthy lives. This is one of the only places on the planet where men reach 100 at roughly the same rate as women. Now let's look at their jobs. They're mostly shepherds, farmers, people who bake bread, make cheese, and sustain local economies with buildings and trades. In accounting terms, they're barely a single speck of light on the vast canvas of the universe. A man who walks up a hill every morning, eats what he grows, drinks wine with people he's known for 60 years, and dies at 101 years old contributes almost nothing to GDP, because none of it was a transaction. In parts of the developed West, however, the local economy is hollow, the work that serves it is devalued, and the contract between employers and workers is distant or broken. The food is terrible and made in a factory or lab, so health falls at the first hurdle. And at the same time, people have just forgotten how to live or taught not to even try, as if to live is a bad thing for the economy. There have been some attempts to buck the trend and oppose this established yet failing economic order, but they fail. In March 1968, when campaigning for president, Robert Kennedy, who campaigned for the presidency after his brother was assassinated, went to the University of Kansas and controversially dismantled the worth of GNP. GNP stands for Gross National Product, the total value of everything a country's people and companies produce in a year, wherever in the world they happen to be doing it. GDP, which only counts activity that happens physically inside the country's borders and not abroad, is more widely used today. He listed what it counts.
Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are Americans.
Stuff like cigarette advertising revenues, locks for the doors and jails for the people who break them, napalm, warheads. Then he listed what it never counts. He said he'd seen children in the Mississippi Delta with distended stomachs and open sores, starving in a country with a GNP of $800 billion at the time. It was this human charisma that might have got him elected. So he was assassinated almost 3 months after the speech, and we still live with the same classical economic metrics today. And they're still used as tools by politicians who treat us like levers to pull. Yet, at the same time, the only thing most normal people care about the economy is whether they can live healthily and afford what they need. Maslow's hierarchy of needs said that survival and security must be satisfied before individuals can pursue higher level growth and self-fulfillment. He called the top level self-actualization, when we fully become what we want to be. But before we continue, I want to tell you that the best way to get a job in 2026 is to focus on industries that are doing well in this economy and future economy, not ones that are struggling, laying people off, and no longer hiring. It starts with following the jobs driving economic growth and the ones that are safe from AI and automation. Think construction, skilled trades, healthcare, and supply chain. Most people chase the same crowded jobs, which drives competition sky high and makes it brutal to get hired. Meanwhile, entire industries are desperate for workers and most people don't even know these jobs exist. Roles like property manager, supply chain coordinator, construction estimator, construction project manager, architectural drafter, medical device sales, HVAC, plumbing, electrician, etc. The 2026 process of getting a job comes down to 4 steps. Step 1, pursue something that's actually hiring and will stay in demand. Step 2, acquire the up-to-date skills to do the real job. Step 3, learn how the hiring process actually works so you can land the interview. Step 4, learn exactly what to say in the interview to get the offer. Course Careers, our video sponsor, includes this entire process in one spot. They offer the skills and all the hiring help you need to get a job, from resume creation to interview prep and more. Plus, Course Careers offers free intro courses to figure out which career path is best for you. So click the link below to start for free and save $50 off any program. Real people with zero prior experience landed these exact jobs by following this process. With Course Careers, Caleb moved into construction project management at $70,000+. Mike also broke into construction project management, and Tyrell became a supply chain coordinator. None of them had any previous experience in the field, they just followed the right process. It's basically a pyramid that just shows you how they expected the Western world to work, and how we've broken that ideal. The US government actually loved it and used it to sell free market capitalism. You can see how security, including employment, is the second lowest level, so nearly as basic as shelter. It's only with that in place that Maslow thought someone could have love, family, esteem, and finally self-actualization. The most damning indictment of how Maslow's idea has failed is how the second bottom tier has been ruined by people's inability to enter the workforce and find security there. If you want to find a way in, it might mean a job in retail, hospitality, or a warehouse, where prospects for job progression can be limited and job security precarious. This is where the replacement of entry-level jobs began with the self-checkout takeover in the early 2000s. That was the first step, convincing society that the new tech product you're offering will make life just a little bit smoother. Streamline a transaction here, remove an unnecessary interaction there, and people will eventually accept it. The problem now is that the wages for these types of jobs are rarely sufficient to live on across most of the West. The savings from replacing workers with machines could have been put into higher wages. Instead, they went into a higher dividend for the shareholders. That's why in America, even with a booming economy, you now need $28.17 an hour to rent a modest 1-bedroom without being classed as cost-burdened. And yet, the average renter makes $23.60 an hour. The federal minimum wage is $7.25, and there is no state, no city, and no county in the country where a full-time minimum wage job covers a 2-bedroom. 17 of the 25 most common jobs in America don't even cover a 1-bedroom home. And then it stops being just about wages and starts being about a lie. 70% of the 21 million people in the US claiming food stamps or Medicaid work at some of the richest organizations in the country. Walmart, Amazon, McDonald's, Target, and Home Depot all make the list. So the biggest companies in the country pay wages so low that other taxpayers have to then close the gap, and the difference is the profits they pay out to their shareholders. This is, of course, quite consistent across the West. In the UK, 4.5 million jobs pay below the real living wage, and 42% of the people working them used a food bank last year. It's why now 1/4 of the UK is apparently disabled, because why work any of these jobs when you can just take welfare? The second type of entry job is the one you might seek after years in education or training. It doesn't really matter if you pursued university, vocational training, or put the time in yourself to learn something you can call yourself good at. The point is, you were told that investing in yourself was the way forward and would offer security. But you're now in a situation where you might be 1, 2, 5, maybe even 10 years into your specialism, and you can see the rug getting pulled from underneath you. It can be very subtle. Some careers were built around specific tools. Adobe switched Flash off on the last day of 2020, and then animators and browser game developers who'd spent years mastering it basically turned to face the wall. AI has then killed even more jobs than any other technology. Translators, paralegals, radiologists, accountants, all sorts of IT professionals. Jobs that would offer decades of security and a decent retirement even 20 years ago. It might also be that your work is being subtly diluted by AI. The visual arts were always a canary in the coal mine here, with big companies dropping human creative teams in favor of AI. But there's also a third category, and this is the most interesting and also the scariest. I'm talking about the trades, like becoming an electrician, plumber, or carpenter, professions that government specifically made untrendy for decades because they wanted more technology professionals whose days are now distinctly numbered. Jensen Huang takes this very ironic stance that tech desperately needs more craftspeople.
AI may be coming for some job sectors, but as far as plumbers and electricians and those kinds of trade jobs go, those people are safe.
He says the demand is not for hospitals and houses, but the factories required by AI. People get into trades for long-term job security, but most value their service to the community. But even that is now being killed off. Elon Musk says the same thing, that any digital job will be taken like lightning, while practical jobs will remain strong.
AI is really still digital. Ultimately, AI can improve the productivity of humans who build things with their hands or do things with their hands, like literally welding, electrical work, plumbing, anything that's physically moving atoms, like cooking food or farming or like anything that's physical. Those jobs will exist for a much longer time. But anything that is digital, which is like just someone at a computer doing something, AI is going to take over those jobs like lightning.
The funny thing about Jensen's point is data centers are huge and they do create temporary blue-collar roles, but they don't require long-term staffing. In fact, a data center creates almost nothing long-term of any worth to the average person, while destroying the local environment, stealing water, and creating an eyesore in the name of technology sworn to replace them. Outside Reno in Nevada, a colossal facility of over 1 million square feet is projected to create a pathetic 73 permanent jobs over the next decade. And to get there, more than 4,000 construction workers will cycle through the site, not in houses, hospitals, or community buildings, but a data center. Meta's campus in Indiana cost $10 billion, will take 4,000 workers to build, but only needs 300 to run by their own marketing. There's also one in Ohio that cost $136 million and is projected to create 10 jobs. Okay, you can argue that it's better than nothing, but it isn't sustainable. And the absurd thing is that big tech begged governments for technology professionals for years until they agreed to build education around them, and now suddenly they need construction workers. At the same time, the tech workers are getting laid off faster than almost anyone else by the same companies that wanted them, and often by the same tools they helped to build. Check out this Microsoft recruitment video from 10 years ago with glowing testimonials from young workers.
I've been working for Microsoft for 1 year now, and I started working on the Surface type cover about 1 month into my job, which was pretty crazy being 3 months out of college, and I'm already working on something that's really a cornerstone of where Microsoft is right now.
We call it drinking from the fire hose, all the information that you kind of get.
When I first started working at Microsoft, I ended up working on an internal tool that 400 of our partners use every day.
It says they worked at Surface, Xbox, and SharePoint. A bit of research show what happened to each one since. The Xbox division was first cut in 2023, then again in early 2024 for 1,900 jobs, then 650 more, and even more recently. So as you can imagine, the person in this video hasn't worked there for years. SharePoint also lost thousands of jobs just recently in 2026, and Surface has consistently seen mass layoffs. Microsoft laid off a crazy 2.1% of their global workforce just this year. The chances are that none of them have their original job there anymore. Google, Meta, they're all the same. The best chance most have is hopping from one to the other while fleeing redundancy, and the individual is blamed for this. For those who simply can't get a job and don't see the value in training, they might fall into a category called NEET, not in education, employment, or training. It costs European economies an estimated 142 billion euros a year, between the lost tax revenue, the lost productivity, and the benefits paid to people who aren't working. The obvious explanation is that an entire generation lost its work ethic. The classic boomer argument wheeled out every single time that young people don't know how easy they've got it. Nobody is saying personal responsibility doesn't exist, but the lazy story is easier to tell than the structural one. The lecture of try harder or this is entirely on you costs nothing. A policy with a proper strategy and investment costs money. That's why all we hear is this instead.
Learn, 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 learn.
Because the most important skill in life is the skill of working hard.
What do you think kids should be studying these days?
Resilience,
Adaptability, a high rate of learning, creativity, certainly familiarity with the tools.
The current job crisis does have a lot to do with AI and automation, but the next stage is bigger. The tech CEO dream is completely severing the connection between people and work. To answer the question of what happens to all the money, there have been various proposals like a UBI. I mean, wasn't Sam Altman saying that AI would mean we could pay everyone a universal basic income? That the productivity gains would be so enormous, so generative of wealth, that the only fair response was to pay everyone a dividend just for being alive. Well, he's changed his ideas on that one.
If you just like say, okay, AI is going to do everything, and then everybody gets like a dividend from that, it's not going to feel good. And I don't think it actually would be good for people. So I don't just want like a check every month.
Being paid for doing nothing would be demeaning. People need purpose, and obviously work should be enjoyable if it can be. Except what replaced UBI and Altman's thinking wasn't work or shared ownership of AI or anything that might give regular people actual leverage. It was this.
I wonder if the future looks something like more like universal basic compute than universal basic income. And everybody gets like a slice of GPT-7's compute, and they can use it, they can resell it, they can donate it to somebody to use for cancer research. But
instead of money, everyone gets tokens, the ability to use AI, which you can spend on using AI.
I think it is possible that we put, GPT-7 or whatever in everybody's ChatGPT, everybody gets it for free, and everybody has access to just this like crazy thing such that everybody can be more productive, make way more money. It doesn't actually matter that you don't like own the cluster itself, but everybody gets to use it. And it turns out even getting to use it is enough that people are like getting richer faster and more distributed than ever before.
And the guy who owns the cluster is telling you that not owning it doesn't matter, that access is enough, that being allowed to use the thing he owns is the same thing as having wealth of your own. Musk and Altman don't agree on much, but Musk does agree that money is on its way out.
I think money will stop being relevant at some point in the future. And I think the AI down the road will really not use human currency. It will just care about power and mass, wattage and tonnage.
Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, is at least more on the nose about the wealth centralization of this world being a nightmare scenario.
The nightmare would be there's like this emerging zeroth world country of like 10 million people that's like 7 million people in the Bay, in like Silicon Valley, and 3 million people kind of scattered throughout. That is kind of forming its own economy and is becoming decoupled or disconnected, right? Maybe the 10% GDP growth looks like 50% GDP growth in that part.
A world country, 10 million people, all forming their own economy, all decoupling from the rest of humanity. In this world, human capital is progressively devalued, built on the idea that markets, not governments, should decide almost everything by deregulating, privatizing, and cutting the safety net, letting competition sort the winners from the losers. There haven't been many critics more enthusiastic on this than Pierre Bourdieu. In his essay called The Utopia of Endless Exploitation, he tells you what we're left with once you strip away all the talk of freedom and flexibility of the modern workplace. He says it's a decades-long project to dismantle anything collective that stands between people and the market, because a person alone and scared has so little leverage, and that benefits corporations. The Anthropic CEO has later echoed this exact sentiment in a CNN interview.
There's an inherent social contract in democracy where ultimately, the ordinary person has a certain amount of leverage because they're contributing to the economy. If that leverage goes away, then it's hard to make democracy. It's harder to make democracies work, and it's harder to prevent concentration of power.
And he's right, but it started way before AI. Think of how every corporate job comes loaded with the individual targets, the individual bonuses, the individual performance review, so everyone is personally responsible for their own numbers as though they were each running a small business of their own. In Bourdieu's words, a Darwinian world emerges. It is the struggle of all against all at all levels of the hierarchy, which finds support through everyone clinging to their job and organization under conditions of insecurity, suffering, and stress. The big trick is the anger for everything we've talked about should be aimed upward at the CEO who calls the shots, but instead they divided the workforce into millions of individuals, each one fighting to look irreplaceable while the leaders are completely insulated from the pressure. Dario again echoes that himself, placing responsibility onto the workers who had no say in their reality.
Yeah, well, let's take them one by one. I think for ordinary citizens, I think it's very important, learn to use AI, learn to understand where the technology is going. If you're not blindsided, you have a much better chance of adapting.
So then how did we get to a point where we end up trusting numbers and the words of the economic elites over our own eyes? For most of history, if you wanted to know something, you looked to the Church of God. The church knew, the king knew, Aristotle knew. Most decisions came down to pure intuition, sometimes right, often wrong. Either way, authority was clear and their word followed. Then academics in Europe suggested a radical alternative. Instead, you should measure something, record it, and produce an objective judgment. That then gave birth to the European Enlightenment that thrust science to the forefront of education, creating everything from vaccines to engines, electricity, and anesthetics. Economics as we know it today came from this era, so obviously the next step was to apply objective science to society. Measurement appeared to be beating disease and engineering, so why not poverty? Comte gave the project a name, social physics. The issue is, the moment you try to measure a society, you have to make a decision about what's going to count and what isn't. And that's when toxic ideologies enter the picture. Unemployment is a very clean example of where this becomes an issue. Before you can measure it, you have to define it. And the definition almost every Western country settled on is that you're unemployed if you're actively looking for work. There are massive cracks in the definitions. Consider someone laid off in their middle age, who sends out hundreds of applications over a year with no offers and eventually stops applying. He hasn't found a job, but he hasn't stopped needing one. He has just simply fallen outside the definition. The more people give up, the unemployment figures get better. Inflation is the same. What goods do we count when we talk about inflation? The last laptop or TV you bought might have been surprisingly cheap. Your weekly shop is where you're paying way more for less every single time. But these goods are ratioed into a compound number that can be tweaked and edited at will. So if unemployment goes down, then another figure like the NEET rate is introduced and goes up. And guess which one you'll hear about? The one that ideologically suits the ruling elites who are ultimately profiting from the servant class. Everything else is brushed under the carpet, unless of course another party or company wants to dredge it up to compete for your attention. In other words, the government is selective about what it's even promoting. And this is why we all feel so poor in a quote-unquote booming economy. Because this is an era when economic metrics are prime for manipulation. You are feeling the effects of that when your intuition and experience don't match the hype. It was built by people with something worth protecting, and it protects it well. The person it doesn't protect, well, is you. As human value falls while everything else seems to painfully and paradoxically rise in the other direction. You're not alone, millions of people are going through this, and it's buried under the loudest, richest voices that have their fingers on the buttons and levers.